From Recorded Future News and PRX, this is Click Here. What happens when we start outsourcing the most important part of being human? If we let AI step in when decisions get hardest, when the stakes are highest, and what does that do to us?
I think it's going to be a while before we actually know what effect they've had on our moral skills and capabilities.
I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and this is Click Here. We tell true stories about the people making and breaking our digital world. Today, we continue to explore what happens when we hand our moral judgment over to machines. To help expand the conversation, I talked with Shannon Vallor, professor of ethics and artificial intelligence at the University of Edinburgh and a researcher for the Edinburgh Futures Institute. Among the things we discussed is, if we turn to AI to help us make hard decisions, what happens to us when we let it? And what happens to our sense of right and wrong?
By the time we have that evidence, the effects will have already transpired at scale.
Stay with us. When a new tool starts showing up in places where humans had previously been weighing right from wrong, it's worth asking, what's it changing in us?
A lot of the rhetoric around AI is not just about exaggerating the power and capabilities of AI, but I think the deeper and more dangerous trend here is to use this framing as a way to justify diminishing human agency, sidelining human creativity, power, judgment, and responsibility. Essentially, what we're saying is we can forget about all of those aspects of ourselves.
Shannon has spent years thinking about how technology quietly reshapes what it means to be human. And one thing that worries ethicists is how easily we start to talk about machines as if they're more than tools.
We can see that the machine can perform it 100 times faster than any human on Earth could. But what happened is that the language very quickly slipped into describing these as superhuman, divorced from a measurement of a particular task and a particular target, like speed. And I found this language really dangerous from the beginning and really misleading.
Because once we start talking about machines as superhuman, something subtle shifts. It no longer sounds like something we built. It sounds like something better than us, something we might trust, even when we shouldn't. And you can hear that shift everywhere now, in headlines and social feeds, and the kinds of problems people are starting to hand over to AI.
Using AI chatbots as personal therapists is on the rise.
Your kids might be having romantic relationships with artificial intelligence.
Here's a look at what ChatGPT had to say after a user asked for some help with the female that he was interested in. ChatGPT analyzed.
AI spits out answers in language that sounds human, empathetic, thoughtful, reassuring. So it's easy to feel like it understands. But it doesn't. AI doesn't reflect, it doesn't care, it doesn't weigh right and wrong. It just calculates.
The way you design machine learning models to optimize for what we call an objective function is you essentially set up the goal as a math problem. And you say, this is how we want you to calculate success. And then we want you to learn how to return results that come as close as possible to this target, which again, has to be mathematically predefined in order for the machine to know what a good answer looks like. And ethics is not a math problem.
So, in plain English, large language models don't think about your question. They predict what words are most likely to come next by drawing on what humans have already written, the good, the bad, and the deeply online. From academic papers to bad Reddit takes to fan fiction. So instead of looking forward, it's actually looking sideways across the past and handing that back to you. Less like a compass and more like a mirror. Can you talk about what AI is actually reflecting back to us?
If you think about the way mirrors work, they reflect wavelengths of light that are falling on glass and then coming back to us, and therefore we get the reflected image. There is a very similar thing that's happening with large language models, which is that they are ingesting large volumes of data. But instead of light falling on glass, you have huge troves of data falling on algorithmic surfaces. These are sort of mathematical instructions for how to respond to data and how to analyze data.
People are already turning to AI for help with life's biggest questions. Who should I date? Should I change jobs? And what does this mean spiritually? Not because it's wise, but because it's available and it answers. The problem is, and we mentioned this before, what it gives back isn't really a way forward. It's more like a summary of where humanity has already been. The greatest hits, the worst takes. It's a record, not a roadmap.
Think about climbing a difficult mountain that you've never summited before, and you have no idea what the terrain looks like. You would not navigate that mountain with a mirror pointing backwards, right? That just showed you where you'd already been and the routes you'd already taken. The ability to navigate uncertain and new futures is fundamental to human development.
And humans have done this before, moved forward without a clear map. They do it mostly by stumbling and arguing and protesting, getting it wrong and then trying again. That messy friction is how societies change. It helped end slavery and segregation. It put limits on nuclear weapons. It won women the right to vote. None of that was efficient. None of that was optimized. Instead, it required courage, imagination, and a willingness to step into the unknown without guarantees. Shannon worries about what happens if, instead of struggling through moments like those, we start looking to a machine for the answer instead.
If AI had been doing the policy making and doing the voting and making the moral decisions in the 19th century or the 20th century, I wouldn't have the right to vote. I'd still be considered property.
Mm-hmm.
That was a leap forward into an unknown political and moral space.
It's vision, right?
Yes, it's moral vision, it's moral creativity. And this is a fundamental gap in these systems' capability.
A system trained on the past can't imagine a future that breaks from it. It can reinforce patterns we've already decided were unjust. And it can't absorb the full weight of human experience, the history, the content, the fear, or hope that never gets typed into a prompt. And it isn't built to challenge us.
People are getting advice about how to handle marital arguments, and there's been some reporting on this. And it's quite disturbing, right? The way that some people have found that the machines are encouraging actually them to see themselves as the victim in a relationship where they may be as flawed as their partner. And so these technologies have what we call sycophancy.
Sycophancy, a technical term for something very human feeling. Flattery.
They're fine-tuned to please the user because that's what's commercially viable, right? The machine has to keep the user happy or else the user stops using it and stops paying for it.
Healthy relationships aren't built on constant agreement. They involve honesty and friction and repair. And when we turn to other humans, friends, pastors, partners, something else enters the equation. Risk, vulnerability.
Traditionally, one of the important pastoral functions of a religious leader was to listen to their parishioners' troubles without judgment, with compassion, and in a way that would provide guidance rather than condemnation. But humans are flawed, and we're imperfect, and we do judge. So I think people are taking a risk when they talk to another human. You're being vulnerable. You're opening yourself up to another human being whose professional vocation may require that they treat you with compassion and sympathy and not judgment. But you'll never know whether that's in fact what you're getting, right?
That uncertainty, the emotional risk, is part of what shapes moral judgment. And a chatbot removes that risk entirely.
If you go to a machine, you know that you're not being judged because the machine is incapable of making that kind of deep personal moral judgment of your character. It can pretend to do it. But we know that the machines are all dark inside. There's no thought, there's no perception, there's no feeling towards you.
And that's part of the appeal. No judgment, no discomfort. But what happens when we start preferring that? That's next after the break.
It is called Internet.
I use the World Wide Web information superhighway.
Cybersecurity.
Why do things go viral? Click here.
Part of being human is that we often try to find the path of least resistance, the shortcut or quick hack that gets us to the solution we need without having to spend all that energy navigating some pesky, complicated problem. But what happens to those complex skills if we don't use them? Shannon says they weaken.
So we've got some evidence that even experienced, skilled professionals can see those skills degrade in a relatively short period of time if they're offloading much of that judgment to AI systems.
So what happens if we stop making those calls ourselves? Not just the big moral crossroads, but the small decisions that quietly shape who we are.
What happens to our capacity, our ability to retain moral wisdom, our ability to retain the ability to make tough moral calls? Because if moral capability is developed through habit and practice, then it can be lost or degraded through neglect, just in the way that our other cognitive faculties can.
If that capacity weakens, the effects don't stay personal. They ripple outward into families and institutions and societies.
Frankly, the foundations of society fall apart at that point. And it's very easy for it to feel too scary if your whole life you've had a machine that promises to give you the same kind of feedback without the risk. It's important that we take risks and make ourselves vulnerable to one another. It's fundamental to the relationships of family and friendship and community that we all be able to open ourselves up to other humans.
Shannon isn't arguing that AI has no role at all. There are areas where machines can genuinely help, especially when the challenge is scale and not judgment. In an emergency room, for example, tracking supplies, beds, and who's where. Tools that support human judgment rather than replace it.
I think there's a world where the machines are, in fact, helping us make these kinds of decisions in scenarios where we simply can't make the best decisions on our own.
But even there, another problem emerges: accountability. If a machine makes a life-altering decision about your health or your freedom or your future, who answers for it? Who can change it? You can't vote an algorithm out of office, and you can't cross-examine one in court.
And yet, I hear every day people talk about how wonderful it's going to be when human policymakers and human judges are letting their decisions be guided by super intelligent, superhuman AIs. And that is a future that we should resist with every fiber of our being.
And this isn't hypothetical. Millions of people now use AI every day. If even a small fraction of them experience harm without a clear way to repair it, it won't stay isolated. And what's more, we may not know right away that it even happened.
I think it's going to be a while before we actually know what effect they've had on our moral skills and capabilities. And that's kind of scary because by the time we have that evidence, the effects will have already transpired at scale.
We've seen this movie before with social media.
We have settled into a pattern, but relatively few of us would think that our political environment is better for it, or that our media environment is better for it. What instead we've done is settle for a worse condition of those institutions as a result, in part, of not choosing to regulate these technologies appropriately.
A slow drift followed by regret.
If we follow the same pattern with AI, then I think we will end up settling for a degraded version of ourselves and our societies.
Because once those moral muscles atrophy, it's not clear how long it takes to rebuild them.
I think we're at a very critical moment in time where we have a window that has not closed to reclaim our moral agency, our moral responsibility, and our moral intelligence, and our ability to learn to work with technology differently. So I'm always, shall we say, hopeful in the long run, because humans have a long history of wiggling ourselves out of difficult predicaments that we've put ourselves in.
But hope, she says, isn't automatic. It requires action, now.
The kind of AI we have and what we let AI become in our lives and in our society is still very much up to us.
Machines can give answers, but they can't replace the work of being human. And in a real crisis, there may be no time to ask an AI what to do. There'll only be you, your instincts, your values, your judgment. So, at the end of the day, it's worth asking, who's really more superhuman? The machines or us? This is Click Here. Click Here is a production of Recorded Future News and PRX. Today's show was written and produced by Megan Dietrich, Sean Powers, Erica Gaida, Zach Hirsch, and Casey Georgie. It was edited by Karen Duffin and Sarah Quevedo, and fact-checked by Darren Ankrum. Original music is by Ben Livingston, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. Our staff writer is Lucas Riley, our illustrator is Megan Goff, and our sound designers and engineers are Jake Cook and Jesse Neiswanger. Find us on X or Facebook at Click Here Show, or leave us a voice message at 661-5CH-TALK. Sometimes we'll turn those moments into reporting, sometimes into a conversation, and sometimes into a future story you'll hear on this show. I'm Dina Temple-Raston, and thanks for listening.